What are the country's top CEOs doing to build extraordinary teams and cultures who thrive even during a pandemic? You're about to take a deep dive into the minds of wildly successful C-suite leaders who are evolving the way that we work in the 21st century. Welcome to this special edition of How to Be Mesmerizing. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and we have another extraordinary, mesmerizing CEO with us today. Glen McDermott is here. Glen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tim, for asking me to join your mesmerizing team. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Excellent. All right. So let me tell you, our listeners, a little bit about you, Glen. So you are the founder and CEO of Red Rock Branding. You grew up in Australia and spent a lot of time in the Outback, especially on anything that had two wheels. So a lot of cycling and exploring. After your studies in Australia, you served on the marketing teams for Australia's Country Road, Metro in Singapore, The Limited in the US, and other Fortune 500 companies. And you formed Red Rock, which takes the corporate world's best marketing practices and applies them to nonprofits, health and wellness initiatives, and small and mid-sized businesses. So I'm excited to chat with you so we can learn from you today, Glen. And today he's here with us to share his insights from all the experiences that you've had, which are pretty amazing. So you've traveled to 37 countries and mainly on bicycle. So which you said opened you up to the world and made you feel vulnerable to your surroundings, yet you were warmly received by complete strangers anywhere that you cycled, and you shared stories and communicated across language barriers, and you've had these amazing experiences that have transformed you. So tell us a little bit about those experiences, because that's pretty extraordinary.
Thanks, Tim. It's a difficult kind of starter and one to encapsulate so briefly, but I grew up in Canberra in Australia, which was the sort of the frontier town of the Australian cities at the time. And I really looked at atlases and travel logs and things as a kid. And I was somehow drawn to this idea of being an adventurous traveler and explorer of some sort, even though I was, hugely misguided in what that involved. But I did also share a passion about self-propulsion and two wheels. So growing up in a small sort of working class family house, it was welcome to escape the boundaries of the family and do my own exploring. And I discovered, eventually 10 miles, I could do 10, I could come back from 20 miles, I could do 30, 40, 50. And eventually I was doing short trips, overnighters and so on. And I realized that I had something. All of my friends in Australia were saying, oh, you must backpack around the world. And I was like, no, I've got a much easier way, actually. So these things just accumulated as sort of built one on top of the other. And eventually I was doing longer trips around Australia and Tasmania and New Zealand. And then I ended up doing a trip through Southeast Asia. And the last trip I did around Europe was about 7,000 miles over 3 or 4 months. So yeah, I feel really lucky to have done that, because it's given me such a rich well of vivid memories that are with me forever. And there are many times when I'm, of course, out there in the wet and the wild where you think this is just nuts. But I feel very thankful to have done that and to have seen so many different people, so many different cultures, that it was a pivotal moment for me in my career. And also personally, it's incredible to overcome these challenges one little mile at a time. And the cumulative effect of that is that you realize that you can actually do anything you put your mind to, as long as you have fun doing it. So yeah, I feel so privileged and fortunate to have done that.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. And you just touched on one of those beliefs. My whole work is around unconscious beliefs, and you have 3 core beliefs that you said that kind of evolved from that. And you just mentioned one of them. So the best way to achieve big, audacious goals is to have fun doing it.
Yeah, and that's kind of folded into my, later adult life, when I realized that if you don't have your heart in it, then you're just not going to do a really good job at it. And hence all the work we do around purpose, and a lot of the work that you do around the challenges around changing people's minds as well. So That's been a core belief of mine that I've tried to maintain. I have that belief has been derailed a couple of times when I've taken various corporate jobs for different reasons, and I've realised that no, it's no fun in there. So eventually we built Red Rock about 10 years ago, and that was based on these principles. Yeah. And maintaining fitness and physical and spiritual fitness is a core part of who you are. It's a core part of how you will contribute to the health and wellness of the world as well. So, and then trail, of course, it's such a rich source of empathy to cycle through these different cultures and smell the food and the crops and talk to the people and really understand where they're coming from. So that's helped me in marketing practice, of course, because you need to have a similar empathy for what your clients' challenges are. So it's been a rich source of, and because you're on a bicycle, you're pretty vulnerable. So you're going to figure it out one way or another. So yeah, that's probably been the three, pedestals, I guess, to what we're doing at the moment.
Well, it's a strong message. I love those beliefs because I agree with them. I think the more fun you have, the more successful you become. And I've helped so many people to break through barriers just by having fun. I've worked with a lot of very successful athletes who will find themselves in a slump. And often what we do is we just get them to have fun again, instead of the pressure of their performing and of all the expectations that they put on themselves. And when you just go out and you have a good time, people are able to turn that around and get right back in that zone again. So I think it's also important what you said about maintaining fitness, because a lot of times we're so driven to make money or to hit our numbers or to grow our market share that, we sacrifice our health time and time again. And if you don't feel good, what's the point of having all the money or having all the other success if you don't feel good, right? So that's very powerful. You've created a company that builds healthy communities, and you have a lot of long-term, very impressive clients like the Yale School of Medicine and Columbia University and Manufacturers CT and Conscious Capitalism and a new one, the City of New Haven's Department of Health. So what's it like working with these prestigious organizations and getting their messages out?
I'm not too attached to the word prestige, but I'll accept that, Tim. Thank you. I'm more importantly working with public health organizations that have a lot of impact in what they do. So what we've been able to do at Red Rock is just bring the world's sort of best practices with marketing and particularly digital and targeting and so on, and really just showing these people the benefits of living healthy lives. And it's funny, since I've been in the US, I've been here 20 years now, I arrived thinking, what a country of absolute abundance and everything. And I was so impressed and in awe with it all. But, underneath all that, it's some pretty bad habits around public health and the kind of food we eat and so on, which are much the same in Australia, by the way. So I was really driven by that. It's like, wow, there's a need for this work. And we were able to demonstrate success over and over again just by producing these client stories in a way that really resonates with their customers. So we've been lucky enough to do some great work. We are also sort of very much interested in the statistical side of what we do. So we've been monitoring these case studies forever, and it's really satisfying at night to just lay down and say, wow, we've done some good work. We've created some healthier habits around this planet. And it's very satisfying for me and the team at Red Rock.
I really love how you said that. A lot of times it looks great on the surface. And then when you take a look underneath, when I've been brought in to work with companies, sometimes I'll walk in, I'll be sitting in their really fancy lobby and I see the glass display with all these really fancy awards for customer service. And then I go talk to the employees and they're like, I hate it here. The culture's terrible. The leaders, treat us like children and it's like completely different from all the fancy awards that they have in the cabinet. And so you and I both like to take a peek under that rug and see what's really going on. So let me ask you this. So we both teach leaders how to use business as a force for good to elevate humanity. And you often ask the question, what does purposeful work look like? So what do you think the answer to that might be?
It's interesting because a lot of people say, oh, just follow your passion. It's really easy. Here's the key, and I
Yeah.
think it's a bit trivial. I mean, passion, I have many passions and none of them are going to convert to a good career. Although I do them on the side with great passion and expect very little in return. But I think with purpose, it's more about finding out what you're good at and what really motivates you, and be really good at that. And then the results will follow. So, and in my case, it was about public health and, how to create communities around public health that really make a difference. So we love what we do, and we've got plenty more work to do, given, COVID and all the other challenges that we have going forward. But yeah, I think it's really important to just identify what you're good at, identify what needs you can see in the community, and then bring those two together in a way that makes sense for you and you can feel good about what you do.
Yeah, I like that. Sometimes people say, well, I make rubber bands, or I make this widget, I don't know how much more purpose I can really bring into my work life. But it's not just about the job you do. It's how you're helping people. It's how you take care of yourself. It's how you show up with your work. It's the kind of pride that you have. I remember, I think it was Les Brown who was telling me, he said, if I was ended up being a janitor, I would have been the best janitor you would have ever seen. I said, I ended up being a speaker, so I'm going to be the best speaker you ever seen. It's a pride in yourself, a pride in your work, a pride in how you show up. And so there's more to purpose than just what we do. I like your definition of passion versus purpose. That's good. So in the 21st century, there's a movement to develop more human and planet-oriented business models, conscious capitalism, having a B corporation, versus the old attitude that the shareholder happiness is the only thing that matters, even if we have to poison the rivers to gain that. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on this, Glen?
Well, here's the interesting context from my point of view. I was drawn as an immigrant to come to the US more than 20 years ago now. So it was a very attractive brand for me to say, brand USA, land of opportunity. I still believe that, but there are so many flaws in the current system. When you've got 40% of current workers that are, one paycheck away from serious illness or bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy, you've got wealth gap that is worse now than it's ever been. And lots of sort of racial and social equity issues. So you really got to look at the current system and say, well, it used to work for some and now it's working for less. So what can we change as humans? What can we change in the sort of operating system of capitalism that's going to provide a better outcome for more people? And, we use operating system more in software, but in fact, we've built an operating system called capitalism, but we also identify that it needs change. I mean, like you said, it used to be okay to dump toxic chemicals in the river if it generated shareholder value, Well, now we need to look at shareholders as more stakeholders in the community, a much broader definition of who benefits from what you do in your business. And that'll be your employers, your vendors, your community, the people you support, in philanthropic, and the products that you build. So it's a much broader definition now. And I'm really excited to be part of that sort of newer awareness of the fact that the current system is failing. And we need to really reinvent the operating system to be more equitable for all parties involved. And, even if that's, like you said earlier, if you're building rubber bands, well, build really good rubber bands. It's not about the passion that's around that. It's about, there are plenty of companies that just build commodities, but they decide that they're going to build their people. They're going to make a culture, an organization where the culture is really magnetic and people want to come to work. People spend 90,000 hours of their life at work. And yet more than 2/3 of those people are disengaged, actively disengaged. Some of them may well be drilling holes in your boat below the waterline. So you've really got to, as an entrepreneur, take responsibility for that and make your work a fun place to be and engage most effectively with all of the stakeholders that can contribute to that good, fun place to work.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to your core values, of making it fun, helping people to encourage healthy lifestyles, making meaningful work. That's what people really want. I don't think that people are asking for that much. They just want to be treated with respect. They want to know that what they're doing matters. They want to feel appreciated for contributing to somebody else's success and somebody else's wealth, right? And they just want to have a pat on the back every once in a while for that, right? Or to just be treated with respect, right? And know that they have job security. So, because you're right, that's very scary. COVID showed us that a lot of people are one paycheck away from not being able to make it. And that's a terrifying idea, especially when we have so much wealth in this country. We shouldn't be people that are working really hard all the time shouldn't feel like they could lose it at any moment. Yeah. So, you and I are both into busting a lot of myths and harmful unconscious beliefs and biases. And I've been asking others this question too, because there is a debate about it. I don't know how much television and movies influence us heavily, but you still see the portrayals of the stereotypic alpha predator, white male, narcissistic, businessman that's out to get whatever he wants, and he's going to do whatever it takes. And now every once in a while, you'll see women portrayed in that way as well, whatever it takes. But then they balance that guilt that they have by being the soccer coach for their kids' team, or being the great family man or woman, or, being the philanthropist. Yeah, we might have cut down this forest, but we donated, $40 million to, whatever it may be. So, so what are your thoughts on this, as far as that portrayal of people still not caring about the planet and, poisoning the oceans with tons of plastic so that they can make more profit? Do you think that that's still alive today, or is that just perpetuated? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, it is still alive, very much alive and well. There are a lot of folks that might have done their MBAs in the 80s and 90s, and that's kind of what they were taught. So I'm just looking at the system again, the operating system that these entrepreneurs and successful business leaders were driven by and guided by. So I'm not, I acknowledge that, but also I think acknowledge that we need to have a different, more holistic way of treating the system. Now, if you look around Connecticut, which is where I live, there are many, many brownfield sites that are just being, where corporate headquarters thought it was all right to dump stuff into the environment, and all of the complications that provides current residents. So, and the extractive sort of exploitative consumerism and capitalism is not sustainable. So if we have any awareness of what we're going to leave our grandkids, then we at least must acknowledge that those kind of business practices are not going forward, and really have to change something quickly. So anything. And it's interesting what you said about how both of us are in the business of changing minds. In a way, the common sort of narrative around the successful businessman is usually the white alpha male going out and in a predatory fashion, making a killing at work and coming home and sharing with kids and all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of people still see that as their role. And then, like you said, offset that fairly or unfairly with philanthropic or other sort of parts of their life that they can do. But it's so disingenuous to say that I'm one person at work and I'm one person when I go home. That's just such an impossible sort of thought to contemplate. I mean, we're really just, as soon as those values can align with your personal life and your professional life, the better human being you become. So I would just sort of offer that as off-the-cuff advice around just being a better human being, and also probably being a better parent because you feel better about what you're doing. And in many cases, the sort of philanthropic systems that we go to support really just maintain some form of status quo. So they're not really the change agents that we need to be effective and challenge the systems that we need to change now.
That's really good. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, if you're making decisions that are going to poison the tap water, in like Michigan, for example, I bet your family doesn't live there in that town. Right. And so if you're gonna, I remember, what was that movie with well, it doesn't matter. But anyway, it was a movie where she was famous. She was playing this lawyer that was suing people, and they had a glass of water from that town. She said, "Here, drink this." And Julia Roberts, said, "Here, you drink this. It came from that town." And they're like, they weren't drinking it. That's how you decide, and how you make decisions. Would you do it to your own family? Would you do it to your own kids? So that way you have that.
And recently, yeah, that's good, Tim. I've just become a grandparent, and as I hold my young Otis in my arms, I've become much more mindful of the kind of implications of the way we've been doing business. As you said, I grew up in Australia, and recently I had to witness basically the whole continent going up in flames, and millions of animals and lives lost, and lots of my friends becoming the first sort of climate refugees in Australia. So I really felt that as a red flag to climate change. And of course, that was 2 years ago now. And of course, we see things that are much worse. So climate change has become a bit of a passion for me too, in terms of my responsibility to our future generations. And, what are you going to tell your grandkids? What did you do to change things? It's really become quite an urgent challenge.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful to think that eventually you're going to have to answer to someone that you really care about. If you have your grandchild and they're like, "What did you do to help?" And you have to sit there and go, "Well, whatever you say, you'll know secretly in your mind whether you did something or not." So, we've talked before. I thought it was funny because we're always trying to get past resistance, right? And you've said that sometimes leaders are like, "What is this movement you're talking about? Is it some kind of capitalism, capitalist socialism, right? Or something like that?" So, very skeptical of the conscious capitalism movement. So how do you help people get past that kind of resistance?
Well, data doesn't really change people's minds, but I'll use it anyway. And that our founder, Rose Sasodia, wrote a book, and really just profiling the success stories of companies that operate on the principles that we've been talking about. And they outperformed the S&P by 14 to 1. So, and the S&P is often quoted as a sort of a benchmark of, good performance. So to outperform an index like that dramatically is one way of getting their attention. So, it's about creating a community with conscious capitalism. We talk about leading with purpose, where you create a really sense of higher purpose in what the company does and contributing to a better world. The fact that stakeholders are not just about shareholders, they're about community. And then the other two tenets are around leadership and culture. And leadership is around who you are at work, how you show up at work, how you motivate, and create a culture there too, where people want to come to work and people really feel that they can not only contribute to a better world, but have fun doing it. And people that are motivated that way, they just outperform people that punch in and punch out. Because once you're passionate about something, you really put your heart and your hands and your head and your heart into the work in a way that people that aren't engaged on that level just will never do. So there are many reasons that to align your organization along the operating system of conscious capitalism. So if the story of your grandchildren doesn't motivate you, maybe the data points will, because either of those two. But to be honest with you, we really need a new narrative. Ayn Rand wrote this book in years ago around this this predatory sort of white male behavior, and it's stuck in people's minds. We've had, like you said, the entertainment industry has picked up on that over and over again. With Wall Street, and I still think as a culture we tend to put that kind of behavior up on a pedestal and reward it in some way, and it's so mismatches, I think, our belief structure as human beings. You know, businesses are basically a bunch of human beings come together for a certain reason. And so running a business that is more human-centric just makes sense, just from a psychological point of view. And as I said, the other benefits are financial, but you should be doing it just because it's the right thing to do as a human being. You know, one of the people we work a lot with, B Corporation companies. We tend to have a lot in common, and one of them is Bigelow in Connecticut, and they're a well-known tea brand. They do operate very holistically, like we've been talking about. Now, I interviewed Cindy Bigelow one day, and she said it's just the right thing to do as a human being. So if you want the simplest version, there it is. Quote Cindy Bigelow as and she's a great proponent of these ideas and a day-to-day operator of these ideas, and runs a tremendous business in part because of that.
Yeah, I love that, Glen. I love what you said. I've sat in rooms with some very powerful executives before who were resistant to change because they felt like their approach is what made them uber successful. And, you know, often the only way that I could get through to them was, you know, talking about, and I would try different angles. One way I would say is, are you happy? You know, and a lot of times they would say, yeah, I'm happy. And I'm like, well, you should tell your face that, because I've been with you for a long time and I never see you smile. You're always stressed. And it's like, well, it's not stress. And just, you know, I'm a mercenary. It's a strategy, you know, it's a winning. It's about being the most powerful person in the room. It's about what I can accomplish next. And so then I'm like, well, are your children proud of you? You know, and I'm always looking for that question and that angle that's going to cause them to drop that emotional armor and take a look at, are they really happy? Or are they just in this mode of more, and who's powerful and what kind of control do I have? And am I winning? And that almost always comes back to beliefs that were developed when they were little, in their relationships with their fathers or with their mothers, or lack of a relationship, where the only time they got attention is if they were winning or fighting or were the best. And that's when they got their approval. That's when they got their love. That's when they felt like they had purpose. And so that causes them to show up that particular personality type, if they're not narcissistic, which is more of a mental, I think, a challenge in your brain than a personality, emotional learning that you picked up. But those are usually the two types. Either they're a narcissistic personality type, or they have been wounded in the past and been taught and trained that this is how you survive and this is how you become powerful or how you get your love. So
yeah, our founder, Raj Sisodia, has an interesting point of view on that too, in a sort of a yin and yang and male-female point of view. Mm-hmm. He's saying that forgive me, Raj, if I quote this out of context, but it's more about bringing more of a female sort of centered logic and emotional to it, rather than just being this alpha male that doesn't serve anything really. It's not a good sort of operating system to base decisions on. In some ways, you know, culturally we're brought up this way too. Like I don't know about you as a kid, but I often sort of played Monopoly, where, you know, in some cases that may be your first introduction to, you know, capitalism. And it's all about beating your opponents, right? Mm-hmm. There was another version of Monopoly which was based on more collaborative spirit, and the outcomes are very different, but they decided to go with winner-take-all version. But unfortunately, I think those kind of constructs as a kid really affect the way you view the world. And as you said, in a country that it has enormous wealth, I think we have a responsibility to show us and the rest of the world that we can be, without sacrificing prosperity, we can become a better culture just by showing more empathy and being more fair in terms of the wealth distribution. I mean, our, mega stars have got Jeff Bezos shooting himself off to the stars. I mean, it sends a pretty poor signal in terms of what our priorities are when we've got so many people that are suffering so openly through COVID. It just upsets me as an American citizen that we have such a disparity and that we haven't been able to reconcile those things. And I should say this is reflected in many other countries too. I'm not focusing on the US, but it just seems to be in our backyard at the moment.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I'll look in other industries to see what they're doing. So if we take a look at medicine, 100 years ago, people weren't sharing that much information. People were hoarding it to themselves and trying to make them look like the superstars, and they were having the breakthroughs, and a lot of universities weren't sharing information. And with the age of the internet, we are able to share more almost instantly, and being able to collaborate and learning and sharing and building off of each other has made it, although there's still healthy levels of competition going on, even with medicine, the collaborative model is just more effective and more powerful. Two brains are working together are more powerful than one. That's when the third mind is created. Well, what if you have 20 minds working together? If you have 20,000 minds working together collaboratively? There's a gentleman, his father owned a bunch of grocery stores in town here in Indianapolis. And his father used to say that, imagine what you could accomplish if nobody cares who gets the credit. Right? So it's very powerful. So as a marketing expert, you've said that businesses don't need a lot of vastly complex marketing and branding campaigns when your message and your actions are simple and aligned and authentic. So can you give us an example of a business who's aligned like that?
It's funny because it sounds almost self-defeating, but it is a good question, because we're coaching our clients in this all the time about if your purpose is aligned in a way that makes for a great place to work, it makes great products because your people are passionate about it, and customers can identify with it because of the purpose that you've outlined, then the task of customer acquisition, let's just call it marketing, becomes a lot simpler because of all of those things are aligned. Then and a couple of good examples is like Patagonia, for example, how their founders were rock climbers and basically adventure and explorers by nature, how they've built a brand decade after decade, which is still very true to the original founding aspiration of outdoor adventure. And they've done it in such a way that is respectful of the environment and the people that you travel within. So that's just one example of a company that does very little marketing, but speaks volumes about the values of the brand by what they do and how they support the Indigenous communities and farmers of all sorts of exotic alternative agriculture. So they're really walking and talking the product in a way that really makes a strong community, and that, they've got a film business now, which is making some extraordinary documentaries about the work they do and the good work of others. So, when you get all those key ingredients aligned, then it's really powerful as to what they've become. And they've also become quite outspoken politically as well. Just, when the previous administration opened up some of the national parks to oil drilling and so on. So they were very, very vocal in their opposition to that, and continue to be proponents of the environment that they want to protect. So that's one. In REI, to a sort of more diluted version of that, because they're again at a retail level. I spend a lot of years in retail, so they're my default comparisons, because people have decided that they can create social change with every purchase they make, and retailers and brands are becoming more and more aware of that. Like you said, with the interwebs now, things are becoming much more transparent. And consumers can really pick out some bad behaviour and really go hard on companies that don't support the value or the missions of a community. So Nike, I think, have done a great job of that in terms of standing up for the Kaepernicks of the world and racial equity. Ben and Jerry's, with their stance on Palestine lately, which I think is really bold. A lot of companies are trying to present a marketing campaign that will give the optics of that too. So, I'm constantly on lookout for organizations that are not being as authentic as they should. And as I said, consumers can read right through it. And that's just some interesting observations from a consumer market point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. People are definitely wanting to, if you can work with a company where you buy something and then that they're donating to the community or your charity that you endorse, or they're going to do something good with it, or Tom's shoes, you buy a pair, someone's going to get a pair. That makes you feel good. Or you can go to another company, and they don't do that. Who are you going to pick? Right? It starts to become an easier thing to do. And so some companies will jump on that bandwagon because they think that that's a way to get more customers, but they don't really care as much about, the philanthropic side of it. And it doesn't work very well. But the ones who really believe it and the ones who are saying, hey, let's do this, they're showing that you increase your profitability and you increase your loyal fans, because you're being authentic and you're doing something they believe in. And what better marketing than that?
And I think post-COVID, there is a whole new sort of rule book too, in terms of what you can do and should do, in terms of your how you're addressing social equity and racial equity. There's a different level of expectation from consumers to become sort of activists in a way, and I know we do in our house. Like you said, we're very much aware of the kind of social impact that our purchases can make people vote with their wallets. So it's and I see that as a trend from a consumer marketing point of view. I can see that becoming more and more apparent in how we conduct ourselves as brands, as organizations, and as consumers as well. There's definitely momentum building on those two parallels.
Absolutely. You talk a lot about the importance of business leaders having social responsibility, that it's not going to be the governments or the politicians that are really going to make changes in the world. It's going to be business leaders. So what's something that if someone's listening to this and like, this all makes sense and I want to do more, where do I begin? Do you have any suggestions for where, someone can start to be the change that they want to see in their company?
Well, that's a good setup. Thank you, Tim. As you know, I'm the executive director of Conscious Capitalism in Connecticut, and we have been running events for 2 years now where we have people in the room talking about the good work they've been doing to address these issues. And we had a lot of questions from CEOs saying, all right, how do we do it? Give us some tools. So we've been lucky enough to have an incredibly talented board who have all come together in a very collaborative way to share their hundreds of years of experience. And we've built this leaders network that actually starts October 19th. So I'm not sure when you're going to air with this, but it is good timing, I think, in that people can sign up for this mostly remote cohort that we're running. We're getting CEOs in the room that talk about all their challenges around these things that we've been talking about, and how we can collectively and individually make the changes that's going to make for a more human kind of business model. So that is one answer to your question, and I'll put some links in the chat, and I'm sure you can share them with the group afterwards. But and just be aware and mindful of the impact that we as consumers are having on day-to-day lives. We've all learned. I used to travel 4 or 5 times a week in one of my previous lives, and I can't look in the sky now and think I used to live at 30,000 feet, and all of the carbon impact that has. So we have learned some great lessons around doing business in a profoundly more environmentally friendly way. And this is a good example, meeting Tim on Zoom and having a great chat here today, all that sort of close to net zero impact. So there are many ways that we can continue to do that. At Red Rock, we've been a virtual organization for many years now, so we have close to net zero impact there. I'm not really sure what else to add to that list, Tim, but I hope that provides some additional context.
It does. I'll make sure those links are in there, and this will be released for that date. So that's really great. So people have some resources they can use from Conscious Capitalism. So that's excellent. Yeah. And it is interesting, when we did have COVID and everybody stayed home for a year, how much that improved the planet. What a significant impact it had. It seemed like we had to have some kind of global event in order to get off that crazy train that everybody was on. And so it shows that it is possible. And that's how we started this conversation, with you saying that anything is possible when you put your mind to it. So Glen, how can people find out more about you and Red Rock branding?
Glen McDermott. I'm easy to find: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's a pretty common handle. redrockbranding.com. We'd love to connect with you. You could take a look at some case studies in the way we've worked. And we'll just sort of wrap it up with one last thing, Tim, about culture, because that was the piece that was sort of not very well addressed when we spoke earlier. But the COVID has also been a huge challenge in terms of how organizations continue to operate on a virtual setting. And it was a massive shift away from traditional organizations that were sort of managed top down and very much clock in, clock out sort of operating system. And what we have now is, of course, a much more dispersed workforce where people are become more productive in most cases, depending on what your product is, of course, but have been able to align more accurately with their sense of purpose in their work. So there's been a lot of talk now about this great resignation, because there have been so many people that just don't really care about what they do. And now COVID has become as a time where they really have to make a decision one way or another. So it's sort of been an unintended consequence of COVID as well, is to really have people aligned with what they do. So it's sort of brings me back, and I'll probably wrap it up here just by saying that defining the purpose of what you do and the impact that it has is so much more critical, not only for what you do, but retaining people that align with that. And that's become more profound through COVID. So, yeah.
Well said. Well said. I'm glad you added that, because you're right. COVID is, although it has many challenges and heartbreaking stories, it's also been an opportunity for humanity to reassess what's most important. They've found that when people have more freedom, their quality of work actually went up, their productivity actually increased. Of course, so did stress and anxiety, unfortunately. And so we still need to make sure that we are developing mentally well businesses who take care of their people and their mental health as well as their physical health. But you're right, it's created a lot of opportunities for us to have an update. We update our smartphones all the time. We need to update our capitalism model and system, and so that we're consciously building a more human-centric business landscape. So Glen McDermott, Glen, thank you so much. This was wonderful. It was mesmerizing. I appreciate all the insights and all the feedback that you've shared with us. And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Tim. Now go change something, right? Boom.
That's right. Let's go change something. Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief, or high stress, or procrastination, or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to PowerMindsetProgram.com. That's PowerMindsetProgram.com, and grab your copy today.